All right, welcome back. Before we get too far into this semester, I want to give you a brief overview of basically the main task that senior thesis is all about, which is writing, obviously, the thesis itself using what we like to call classical oration form. So we're going to do a little bit of a preview of basically second quarter, the arrangement, and lead that into the first task for this week, a little work on some thoughts about kairos. Okay, so briefly, arrangement. We looked at this a little bit in the earlier slideshow when we looked at the 5 canons. This is the second one. We'll spend most of first quarter, as we said, on invention, and we'll get to arrangement here second quarter. Arrangement, organization, disposition, as you can see, it's been called different things over the years, as most things, as we said in thesis, have been called by different names and certainly different languages over the centuries. But this is an important thing. Once you've figured out what you're going to say, it's important to put things, all your great ideas, your quotations, your citations, your own thoughts, in a good, effective order, and that's arrangement. That's what arrangement is all about. So we'll certainly be spending a good deal of time on that soon enough, okay? So you can, as always, just read through these slides, the accompanying PDF file on your own as you need to. But arrangement is important because you want to present your ideas in a good order, as we said. All good discourse needs an evident and comely flow, an appealing, engaging sort of beginning, middle, and end, as we've talked about over the years in English class. Certainly your essays, your papers, all your presentations want to begin well and wisely and flow nicely and end in an engaging sort of way. So that is what we're all about, and that's what arrangement is all about. So quickly, this is in your writing handbook. It's in several places and handouts that you've gotten everywhere, but just want to talk through it briefly. The first thing, this is not necessarily the order that we'll be writing in. We'll be doing these steps in bits and pieces throughout, especially next semester, in January, definitely. But this is the final order that everything will be in. Your final paper, your presentation, you will get their attention with the introduction and classical Greek language called the exordium. Some sort of attention getter, not necessarily introduce your main points, that'll be later, but you want to get their attention, and you saw so many last year seniors do that in a variety of ways. And you can still probably look at the Facebook page to see copies of their presentations to get a better idea of the different ways that they got people's attention. And you can see that in later in the sample copies of the final drafts that I'll give you soon enough. So you get their attention first, and then you have a very important narration, which has 3 points. Very important section to give the necessary background, a little bit of the history of the issue, how it got to this point, of where you're talking about it today, why it's important, the history certainly, why it's important for the people today, and not necessarily A, B, C. This is not necessarily the order that you're going to be talking about it, but these 3 things need to be covered in the narration. The historical background, bringing the audience and the issue up to date, any key or technical terms that you'll use again and again. If there's one specific term that you'll only use one time in your paper, you can define it then. But if there's some idea, some issue, some topic that you're going to use and you need the audience to understand it again and again throughout the entire paper, then this is the place where you'd want to define it. For example, if you're talking about like age relationship or the generation gap and how you're going to define certain generations or certain differences between young people and old people, this would be the time where you define, this is what I mean by generation X, or this is what I mean by old people or young people, something like that. Even terms that people might think that they already know a good definition of, you want to make sure you define it clearly your way so they know and you know what you mean throughout the whole paper and throughout the whole presentation. So the narration is where you define important terms, give key historical background, and explain its kairotic relevance to the issue. And kairos is, as we said, something we'll get to in just a few moments in the end of this slide here. Why is this issue important to the audience right now? Why do they need to read your paper? Why do they need to hear your presentation? Why is it important to them right now? And this might be where your thesis itself comes in, somewhere at the end of your narration. Maybe it's in your attention-getting introduction at the end of that. Probably would not be the first thing that you would say, but you can grab their attention, get their narration, and then comes to number 3, a partition, a brief laying out of your specific arguments, and we'll certainly cover that further into the semester. You'll briefly say, in order to prove my thesis, I have 3 points, and here's what those points are. I will then refute 2 major counter-arguments against me, and here's what they are. So 3 leads very much into 4 and 5. Confirmation is the bulk of your thesis, where you say the most of what your proof is, how you're going to actually prove what your thesis statement is. And your main arguments, you're not going to just talk about them in no particular order. We're going to divide up your main arguments, prove them one at a time, and all these major arguments are going to come back to proving your thesis. And you're going to show your audience, before you even do that, I know what my arguments are, I have my main points, and here's what they are before you even start. So you could think of it maybe as sort of like a mini introduction partway through your thesis again, but it's more than just an introduction. It shows your audience, I know what my points are, and these are them. Then after you spend most of the paper, most of the effort confirming it, proving what your thesis is with a variety of ways that we'll talk about later. Yeah, a lot of research certainly will be incorporated into your confirmation. Then you're going to refute. In the refutation, you're going to disprove some key arguments against your thesis. Not just tell your audience, here's why some people disagree with me, or here's how I could be wrong, but you are going to research and take the time to present, here are some arguments that people have against my perspective on my thesis, and here's why they are incorrect. Not necessarily the exact opposite. The confirmation, in fact, it should not be the exact opposite of just your confirmation. The refutation points should be covering perhaps different aspects of your thesis. And we'll, as we said, we'll talk about that much later and in much more detail further along into the semester. But so you're going to prove your point. You're going to prove why people who disagree with you are wrong in different areas, not just the opposite of, 4 and 5 should not just be the opposite. Exactly. They should cover different territory. And like it says right there, the 4 and 5 are going to be the longest sections of your rhetorical enterprise, of your paper, and certainly of your presentation, depending on how you want to structure that. And lastly, of course, there'll be the conclusion, or as the Greeks call it, the peroration. And there are a lot of different ways to conclude your paper, and we'll give you a lot of those options. You can see some already in your writing handbook, but we want to do more than just recap your main points again and again. You're going to take this idea and maybe lead your audience into what they can practically do with your thesis now that they believe your part, they've heard your side of the story, and now you can tell them, here's what you can do with it. You don't necessarily have to do it that way. Maybe you just want to encourage them, stir up their emotions, maybe, give them practical steps, as we said, but there are a lot of different ways that you can conclude this. So those are the 6 main parts of what we're eventually going to be tackling. I just want to give you a brief overview of that before we get too far into, so from early on in the semester what exactly we're going to be doing.